What's going on, everyone? So it's that time of the set release where we got to talk about pre-release because it's coming up soon. A lot of you have been asking about what my thoughts are on set 3 pre-release. So today we're going to be going over kind of some basic mechanics. And you see behind me, I did a previous video on a pre-release, which we'll be kind of reviewing. And then I'm actually going to be going through and doing a complete walkthrough of what I would kind of be thinking about during my set 3 pre-release on Tabletop Simulator. So we're going to be cracking some packs and actually building some decks for the pre-release. So stay tuned. I'll have timestamps in the description down below for any part that you want to jump into. Big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. Everyone, love your support for the channel. And also, I have a TCG player link in the description down below. Be sure to use it for all of your trading card game needs. Let's start off with some things you'll want to think about before jumping in and opening some packs. Before we dive into our mock pre-release for today, we're going to be reviewing a lot of the topics I went over in my full pre-release guide I did for set 2. Now, I'll be providing a little bit of set 3 nuance in terms of things that I'm thinking about in relation to these topics. But the important thing to remember is these topics, if you nail them down, if you get the basics down, any deck can be viable for any pre-release and basically any draft. Of course, there are strengths and some things that I'm thinking about while I'm going through and looking at leaders or looking at specific cards or, of course, some of the other combinations that I'm thinking about. But most of what you can do and most of the power of your deck really relies on your deck building basics, and that's where these topics come in handy. If you want to check out this video, I'll leave a link to it down below. It is in relation to set 2, which might be not necessarily what you're looking for, but it's of course something that you can check out if you want to do so. Now, leaders are the most important topic that we kind of have to build our deck from. It's really important that you pick your leader according to all the different cards that you have in your pool. I could sit here and say, hey, I think Count Dooku is really good because of the exploit and separatist synergies. But if you don't have those synergies, or if you don't have enough command villainy cards, then you shouldn't be picking that leader. And so for this set in particular, we're going to have Ahsoka and General Grievous as base level options because they come in the pre-release kits. But then you're also going to get a bunch of different options from the packs that you opened. Now, a few of them, like Chancellor Palpatine, I believe, I'm looking at the card list over here, Asajj, some of the rare leaders are going to be unlikely for you to pick up. But out of the base level leaders, Ahsoka and General Grievous both seem to have pretty solid bodies in terms of stat lines, and they both seem to work with the set's mechanics. So I think either one of them is actually a really solid option. Couple of other options that I think you might want to consider if you do happen to open them. I think Maul is a really strong common leader as just a really high stat unit that you can kind of close out the game with. Captain Rex really fills in a lot of the mechanics that you're going to be looking for in the heroism decks, and creating a clone trooper token is going to be pretty valuable. And another one that I think is going to be pretty interesting to look at is, well, Count Dooku, because if you're able to pick up a lot of those separatist synergies and maybe some fodder, that's going to be a huge way to cheat on costs. And these color combinations that you're looking at, again, you need to have the cards associated with it, but also you need to make sure that when you're looking at these leaders, you're looking at the power level of the leader itself alongside the cards with it. If you have a ton of command heroism cards, but it turns out the only command heroism leader that you're looking for, like you wanted to play command cunning, the only command heroism leader that you have is like Padme Amidala, I would still not recommend going into that because your leader is just pretty mediocre. You don't really have too much to back up those cards. If you could find some sort of combination where you drop cunning and you're going to play command heroism but use Ahsoka as your leader because it's a guaranteed option, then that's totally fair. But just keep in mind that you're looking at the power level of the leader, but also, well, as we'll talk about in just a moment, the quantity of the cards associated with that leader and the power level that goes along with it. Now, of course, we have to lead our deck with a leader, but oftentimes that leader decision actually comes from the quantity of your cards, which is definitely one of the most important topics to understand. This is something that, for those of you that are coming from other TCGs, Star Wars Unlimited has a unique perspective on, because you're drawing 2 cards a turn and you're able to resource any card out of your hand. This gives you kind of some playroom to where you can have some cards that maybe aren't that strong or maybe are situational. Totally fine to have them in your deck because you are drawing so many a turn, you have so many options, and at any given point you can resource the ones that are pretty bad. And so you really need to pick a main aspect and then a support aspect, and you can even add a third topic to this, which is sort of like what I could consider a flex aspect. So your main aspect is going to be the aspect that you're picking just due to kind of a combination of the amount and power level of cards you have. Let's say you've got, 14 or 15 command cards. That can be command heroism or command villainy. Now, of course, if you are a villainy and you are playing a heroism leader, then you cannot consider the, villainy cards in your pile because they're going to cost 2 extra because you have a heroism leader. So be sure this main aspect is only including the cards that will cost the same as, their printed cost. So again, make sure that your main aspect gives you on-rate cards, because that is why we consider it the main aspect. The main reason we're picking a main aspect is because we don't want to be paying extra for our cards. Now, this can either be the aspect that your leader is in or the aspect that your base is in. It doesn't really matter because, that's where the support aspect comes in, and you can kind of choose, hey, I'm going to pick this leader because I think this leader is really strong, and that's going to be my support aspect. It only comes with like 4 or 5 cards that I want. And then I'm going to pick this green base or command base. I'm picking aggression leader like Ahsoka Tano, and then I'm going to pick this command base because it comes with so many cards that allows me to support Ahsoka Tano because I want to play that leader, but then I have a nice card base to be able to do so. And that's after that, we consider our flex aspect. And this flex aspect is going to be those 4 to 5 slots out of the 30 cards that you need for a deck. I could put in some cunning cards, right? Maybe they're going to cost 2 extra. That's totally fine. I can resource them when I don't want them or they don't look good. Or maybe I'm going to put in some situational cards that are in my aspect, but I don't want any time. Or maybe some colorless cards that are situational, etc. These are the cards that I can consider to most often resource, but in some situations, they'll actually be pretty good for me. So when we're looking at quantity, we also have to look at the power level of that quantity of cards. We could say, hey, I sat down and I opened all my cards and I've got 20 command cards. I'm just going to put them all in my deck and be done with it for the most part. You can do that, but realistically, when I look at quantity, I'm not just considering the amount, but I'm also looking at the amount of playable cards. What does that mean? Well, that means that they have a certain level of power that I'm actually interested in so that I will put it in my deck. And how do we determine a power level of a card? How do we know that they're playable? Well, the first thing that we're looking at the quantity of our cards, and what we have are bombs. This is normally going to fall under your support aspect. So I mentioned earlier we have a main aspect. Normally, we pick a support aspect due to the bombs of that support aspect. What are bombs, might you ask? Well, these are cards that can potentially solo win you a game. From set 2, these are cards like Poe Dameron or Wrecker that were extremely powerful, outstatted things on the board, potentially trade with multiple different of your opponent's units, or just completely ended the game on their own. For set 3, I don't think we have as many bombs, but these are cards that might not be rares or legendaries. A perfect example of a bomb that I would consider in limited for set 3 is Shock T. 4 cost ground unit that gives you a clone trooper token on attack. There's not going to be as many ways for your opponent to immediately kill it. So if you're able to get 1 or 2 clone trooper tokens, this can immediately jumpstart your strategy or make enough bodies to where your opponent can't really deal with it. Another unit that I would consider to be a pretty strong one, potentially a bomb, or most legendaries that are just units are pretty good, but it's something like Kiadi Mundi, 5 cost, 5/7. With that coordinate, when an opponent plays a second card each phase, you can draw 2 cards. Honestly, the coordinate is kind of whatever. Most of the time, just high stat units can be considered bombs in limited just because of how much value you can get from that. After that, we're looking at common and uncommon strength. This is really where you pick your main aspect and where you look at quantity. You're looking at quantity and quality of commons and uncommons. If you have a lot of playable options, cards that look good for their stats on curve, or you need a certain curve and you need 2 drops, you need 3 drops, you need 4 drops, well, that's where the common and uncommon strengths are you're looking at, and tie that in with the quantity. You need enough of them and for them to be powerful to actually keep pace with your opponent. Last thing we're looking at is synergy, and this really comes into play when you're looking at your leader, right? Let's say I'm picking Count Dooku. Well, my Count Dooku leader does absolutely nothing if I have 0 separatists in my deck, right? Okay, if I'm not playing any separatists in my decks, maybe playing a different leader would be more useful. If I'm playing Ahsoka Tano, I might want to be looking at, can I deploy a lot of units to the board? Can I create some tokens? That's kind of a secondary thought after the bombs and common and uncommon strength, but can definitely put the cherry on top, taking a deck from that's pretty good to outstanding in a lot of situations. The next thing I'm looking at for my decks are interaction. This is the ability to prevent your opponent from doing what they want to do, not just doing what you want to do and trying to win that way. You can, of course, win without this step. Okay, if you have a solid base of common and uncommons, you have some bombs, and you're just going to play on curve and you let your opponent deal with you, that is totally a viable way to win. Generally, though, a well-balanced deck is going to have some form of interaction. And in Star Wars Unlimited, you actually have more options than just removal, right? When I say interaction, I don't just mean open fires, takedowns, fell the dragons, those types of effects. Star Wars Unlimited has sentinels. So things that just completely block your opponent from attacking you. Maybe these are great options to stall your opponent out or just prevent from their smaller units getting into your smaller units or getting into your base. Sentinels are going to be, I think, even a little bit more important in set 3 because of all the tokens around. So if you're playing exploit or coordinate, Sentinels are going to be able to protect those guys and you're going to be able to do what you want to do. But we also have another form completely within Star Wars Unlimited's field, and that's space/ground arenas. If you're in the ground arena only and your opponent only goes to space arena, you cannot interact with your opponent. So you need to make sure that you have at least a couple space units. And in some cases, this is not going to be possible because space units are much more rare in your packs, and sometimes you just don't open them, which is totally fine. But if you can, and even if the space unit isn't looking that great, you might want to drop it in your deck, even if it's maybe overcosted for what you're looking for, just because your opponent might be going a little bit more towards space, and you want to be able to interact with them without, trying to get some sort of removal option or trying to race them because you have no interaction in the space/ground arena. Usually, ground isn't something that you need to worry about because most of your deck is going to be ground units. It's really a space category that you want to consider. Hey, do I have options for when my opponent goes into the space arena? That's the thing you have to consider. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is off-color cards. This is a pretty interesting one because in other games, it would be considered, like, for example, Magic the Gathering, like a splash of a color. It's a little bit different in Magic because you have to kind of formulate your deck to incorporate these off-color cards. Whereas, again, when I talked about the quantity of cards in Star Wars Unlimited, you can kind of just play off-color cards in your deck for free. And I say that in quotations because it's not really free. But if you have a well-built deck with like 26 cards, 25 to 26 cards of your 30 being on color in terms of on aspect, you're playing a command deck, command vigilance, and you have command vigilance cards in your deck. They're not going to be 2+ cost. Well, you can play that last 4 to 5 slots as your flex slots, like I mentioned earlier. And these slots can be on color cards, or they could be these off color cards. And in some cases, this is way worth the deal. If I had a card like Kiadi Mundi, for example, would I be willing to pay 7 for that card? Well, not normally, but I would maybe consider putting it in my deck because he's already overstated for what he's trying to do initially. So he's not even that bad as a 7 cost unit. These are the types of things that you're really looking for. Are there units in your deck that you would consider playing for 2 additional costs just because of how powerful they are? And I do think there are a decent amount of them. And in some cases, they'll be understated for what you're looking for. But because you're playing a limited deck, you're totally fine with that since you don't have amazing cards across the board in every single situation. So the question is, are they strong enough? Are the power levels, do they have a powerful enough effect? Let's say you have that Poe Dameron type unit and you're like, okay, I can put this in my deck, but it's going to cost 8. Is that worth it? I would say yes. And then the question is, well, is it worth it, right? Is it worth it to play that? Or are you going to look at one of your mediocre cards that are on color and say, well, yes, I could pay 8 for Poe Dameron, but I can also pay 8 for this 9/9 standard unit. Would I rather have the 9/9? Maybe. Or maybe Poe Dameron's effect is good enough, right? Those are the types of things that you want to consider. And I'm talking about Poe Dameron because, to be honest, I don't really know if set 3 will have too many of these cards. If you look at the more expensive options and the cards that have some really powerful effects, oftentimes they're actually going to be exploit cards. I think there are a few of them that you could consider, like Darth Maul or Savage Opress. But the problem is that when you get to the really high cost units, like 6, 7, 8, the 2 additional costs starts to make those units cost 8, 9, 10, which is not really a cost that you're going to be reaching in a lot of your games. But something that you will want to consider. All right, so now we come to the most fun part of the video, and that is opening some packs. Now, as we're going through, I'm going to be kind of talking through my process, but of course, opening the packs, we kind of just have to see what we get in each pack. I'm going to start by sorting them into their correct color combination piles and separating the rares and the leaders. It's important to note that we'll have Ahsoka and General Grievous. I'm going to try to build decks without those 2 leaders, but I will provide some thoughts on them just with the leaders that we open. Any base is viable, as we could just pick them up at any point. But the initial start is opening your packs, separate your leaders that you get, separate your rares and legendaries, the cards that are potentially causing you to lean in one direction or another. If there's any uncommon that makes you feel that way as well, you can separate that one. At least this is what I do. And of course, separating them by color combination. So we're going to start us off, and we got Invasion of Christophsis as our first card. Pretty cool legendary, but I don't know if it's actually that crazy great. We got Jesse as the next option. And this is pretty interesting card. Creates 2 battle droid tokens when it enters. Not exactly a big fan. Captain Typho 2/4 Sentinel. Not exactly all that exciting. You can pass your Sentinel around, I suppose. Confederate Tri-Fighter 3/3 space unit. Completely viable. Dendups Loyal is completely playable. 2/3. Separatist Super Tank 8/8 for 9 resources. Pretty expensive if you can't exploit it out. In Pursuit, nice little exhaust. Not really a card that I'm looking to play in any of my decks. Wartime Trade Official, definitely a nice Separatist exploit setup card. Phase 1 Clone Trooper, Heroism 3/2, 2 resource, completely playable. Political Pressure, kind of an interesting one. Maybe playable depending on our deck. Knight of the Republic, definitely a nice playable 6 resource, 4/7, totally reasonable, and gets you Clone Trooper tokens on the off chance that they attack you. Senatorial Corvette, kind of an interesting one. 5 resource, 5/4 space units, actually really powerful in limited. Devastating Gunship, nice little space unit for vigilance. Patrolling AAT, 5 resource, 4/5 Sentinel, not too bad. And well, the last one that we got is Anakin Skywalker. So Anakin Skywalker, pretty interesting one. This one is kind of solid for limited, at least from what my perspective is, because what it allows you to do is essentially trade damage on your base for extra value for some of your units. And oftentimes the way you win limited games is by going ahead and getting that value ahead of your opponent. Okay, so this will give you that option to trade units up, which is really nice. And of course, he becomes a really oppressive unit when you do flip him, because he's just going to be a super high statted unit. So I do think he's one of the better limited options. So really nice start in terms of leaders. Again, separate the leaders, separate the rares. I don't think any other card here is like really amazing, but we'll continue opening our packs. Next up, let's see what we got. We got Caught in the Crossfire. Choose 2 enemy units in the same arena. Each of those units deals damage equal to its power to the other. Pretty interesting removal option. By the way, love this art. Love that saga in the Clone Wars. Pretty interesting one. I do think it's very playable in limited, giving you the option of potentially killing 2 units on its own, or just getting a bunch of damage on a unit and killing another one. Lethal Crackdown is the next card. Pretty interesting card. Kill any unit, but deal damage equal to that power to your base. It can be a little bit risky, but I do think it's very playable in limited. We got twice the pride, nice little upgrade. It could be nice in some leader situations. R2, really solid uncommon, actually. Really do like this as a card. Can help you dig to certain cards in your deck if you do have bombs, and just a really nice statted unit. Dendup's Loyalist, we went over this before, but just a solid playable common. There we go. Coruscant Guard, again, nice play, solid playable. 3/2 for 2 resources, totally fine. Creative Thinking, kind of an interesting one. Gets you a Clone Trooper token, exhaust something, can be reasonable. Multi-Troop Transport, pretty bad stat line. Really need to exploit this out, so very much a synergy card. Armored Saber Tank, totally a fine playable in limited. 6 resources for a 5/5 Sentinels, totally fine. Series Officer, definitely going to need some sort of deck where you want Separatists or really aggressive for that to work. Subjugating Starfighter, totally great in limited if you can pick off some low-cost space units, or just, playing a 4 resource, 3/3 Ambushers, totally fine in space. Next up, we got Outspoken Representative, 0/3 when defeated trigger for Clone Trooper. Like, this is pretty bad. Don't really want 2 resources to be spent on a Clone Trooper token without any tangible value outside of that. Another Political Pressure, another Patrolling AAT. Nice little Sentinels here, side by side. A little bit cheaper for a little bit poorer stat line. And we got ourselves Wat Tambor. So a really interesting one. We start ourselves off with 2 very solid leaders, I'd say. And Wat Tambor is actually a rare leader as well. So very high chance that you will not open many of these. This one can be very solid and limited, I'd say. A lot of the times units are just randomly trading off, and getting +2/+2 can be very, very viable as just a way to get in extra damage or a way to trade up. The flip side is a 3/6 that can really give you some value as well by, again, passing that +2/+2. Early to deploy leaders tend to be a little bit weaker, I'd say, in limited, at like the 5 and 4 to deploy leaders, because you really want to get more value out of your leaders. So I tend to steer towards 6 and 7 cost leaders if I can. 7 can be a little bit expensive, but 6 definitely. And Wat Tambor, really his value comes from defeating some early units, trading off in unit combat, and then getting some value from that action to trade up or do some other options. But we got another pack to go into. Let's start off this next one with Mace Windu's Lightsaber. So brand new rare here. And again, separating all the cards from the leader and the rare. Brand new rare. 2 cost upgrade. Gives you +2/+2. Realistically, this one is not a rare that I'd be looking at as a rare that I'm like, ooh, gotta play this one. I might play it. But to be honest, it's kind of like an academy training. For those of you that remember that from set 1, +2/+2 for 2 resources is kind of mediocre. Obi-Wan's Ether Sprite, actually a really powerful space unit. Love this card in limited. You can go ahead and just knock out your entire opponent's Air Force with just this card, which I do find to be pretty strong. Bull Resistance, I don't really see this card being good at all. Getting the 3 traits to share is going to be pretty hard to do. Another Lethal Crackdown. Lethal Crackdown is definitely a playable option, but the second one's a lot worse than the first one, because as soon as you're starting to defeat multiple units with this, you're starting to take 8, 9, 10 points of damage. B1 Attack Platform, perfectly fine, 5/2 for 3 resources. Coruscant Guard, same thing as earlier, perfectly fine playable. Clone Dive Trooper, this one's kind of interesting. If you can get Coordinate active, maybe, or Republic Synergies active, maybe. 1 resource for 2/1 is totally reasonable. Devastating Gunship, yet again, another perfectly fine space unit. Droid Starfighter, I'm not a huge fan of 1 resource 1/2s. I think that's a pretty bad sell. It doesn't put enough pressure and it can just die to everything. So I don't think that card's very good. Falchion Ion Tank, 4/6 Sentinel for 6 resources, totally fine in limited. Wartime Trade Official, another nice exploit setup potentially. Creative Thinking, again, Clone Trooper token, exhausting something, not exactly that exciting. Get ourselves a Phase 1 Clone Trooper, perfectly fine 2-drop for any deck, really, if you're in Heroism. Let me move that real quick. We got ourselves Ryloth Militia. This one's actually pretty nice. If you do have raid, it's a 3/3, kind of like a Battlefield Marine, which is actually quite strong. And then we got ourselves Quinlan Voss. This one, I like his flip side. I don't like his front side. So every time you play a unit, you can exhaust leader to deal 1 damage to something that costs the same. That will not happen as much in limited because people aren't going to be playing on curve nearly as much. And so oftentimes you will mismatch in terms of cost. So I don't think that's going to be all that relevant. The thing that I am excited about for Quinlan, and I think we have opened 3 solid leaders, to be honest. Quinlan Voss, 5 to deploy 3/7. So nice stat line. And then you're able to deal 1 damage to something that costs the same or less than the played unit. And that I think is a lot more relevant because you will be playing things most often higher cost than your opponent's previous play, and so you will be able to get in some occasional points of damage. And also in limited, I will say, on the flip side, you will be able to start picking off battle droid tokens and clone trooper tokens a lot easier. And this one doesn't have a limitation, by the way. So if you play multiple things, let's say in a single turn, you don't have to exhaust Quinlan Voss to go out and get that damage, which can be pretty nice. So not an amazing leader. I think definitely Anakin and Wat Tambor are a little bit more appealing so far, but not a terrible one by any means. Next up, we got Barriss Offee. This one also is unplayable. I don't think you should be playing this one at all. I think it's very much on the same level as like Mace Windu's lightsaber, and potentially even, well, I think it's just worse. 1 resource, 1/1, and it gives each friendly unit that was healed this phase +1/+0. That's like a very much a synergy piece. The Force tag isn't super relevant. The Jedi tag is super relevant in limited. So I just don't see this card being played at all. So that's a kind of a brick pack, but get ourselves manufactured soldiers, totally fine. Double green can be really tricky. So this is like 5 resources for 2 battle droid tokens, or 3 battle droid tokens, 2 clone trooper tokens. Probably not super exciting. Jar Jar, this is a 4 resource play. Again, double aspects are going to be essentially 2 guaranteed extra resources since you don't have enough cards to play mono yellow. Another Obi-Wan's Aether Sprite, love that. Vanguard droid bomber here. This one could be a nice aggressive unit, and space units are a little bit more appealing to me when you have low stat units. Another subjugating starfighter, again, a totally fun play. B1 security team, do like that card. Nice little early sentinel. Padawan starfighter, I mentioned force units are pretty irrelevant and basically don't matter. Padawan starfighter can make it matter. 2 cost 2/4 is okay. It's not amazing in space, but it's okay. Droid deployment, love this card. We've got a lot of exploit synergy pieces with droid deployment and double wartime trade official as I'm thinking about these cards, so I do like that. Another series officer. We got ourselves breaking in. This one could definitely be pretty solid. I do think this is a very solid combat trick, or I guess you could say event for Star Wars Unlimited, so I do like that one. Strategic analysis, not a super exciting card. Definitely don't really want to be forced to be playing that. Warrior drone, not super excited about it. Maybe if we get some separatist synergy, but 1 resource, 1/4, not exactly that great. Wartime profiteering, definitely more of a synergy piece where you're exploiting stuff out and getting a nice draw effect, but maybe playable, maybe not. And then we got ourselves Obi-Wan Kenobi. This one's interesting. I think he's kind of like average. I definitely think he's weaker than like Anakin, for example, if you have the right setup for Anakin. But Obi-Wan does have some options. He works well with the Aether Sprites, which is something to consider because we have 2 of them, right? When you start having multiple of copies of cards, you're very likely to draw them in Star Wars Unlimited, and that's something to consider. And Obi-Wan does work pretty well with them because they're going to be dealing damage to themselves, right? Now, we also have a bunch of Vigilance cards, which is something to consider, right? As we're going through, Vigilance tends to be something that looks like we have a little bit more of, but some of them are villainy, so maybe not. But the heal 1 damage from a unit can get a little bit of value in limited, especially if you're going with value trades. Honestly, the thing that I'm more excited about is the flip side being a 4/7, right? That's just a nice stat unit. And you're able to heal a damage from himself and heal damage from another unit if you are able to heal damage from himself. So this could actually accrue a decent chunk of value. And to be honest, this is a unit where I would want to put something like Mace Windu's lightsaber and just start putting a bunch of upgrades on Obi-Wan and put it all on him, because you could actually hide behind this Sentinel and just completely win the game with Obi-Wan alone. Now, again, the front side action and the flip side, I think on average are a little bit weaker than Anakin and potentially Wat Tambor if you have the right setup for Wat Tambor. I mentioned he's a little bit average. Depending on the deck, I think he actually looks a little bit above average for our setup right here. So I'm actually looking at him and Anakin as the ones that I'm most interested in right now. But we do have a lot of exploit synergies, so maybe Wat Tambor is, or well, cards that we don't mind dying. So maybe Wat Tambor is the way we're going to be heading. We'll see. Next up, let's see. Oh, I flipped that but too many times. We got Saw Gerrera, which I do think is a pretty strong card. So 6 cost, 4/8 raid 2, and you're able to deal 1 damage to each enemy ground unit if your base has 15 or more damage on it on attack. And this is definitely a card that you're looking at. You're like, I do want to play this card. Very nice stat line for a unit for limited. So I'm really interested in that one. Next up, we got Asajj Ventress. Asajj Ventress, well, nice exploit payoff, nice little value piece if you do have Separatist. Another Confederate Tri-Fighter, again, solid stat unit. Low altitude gunship. This one's really nice if you do have a lot of Republic units, can act as a removal option. I think low altitude gunship is one of those really solid uncommons. Reckless Torrent. This one's interesting. I think you get a little bit of value from this from Coordinate. The 2 damage to a friendly unit, 2 damage to an enemy unit with Coordinate does happen a little bit more in limited from what my experience has been, because your opponent doesn't have as many ways to deal with your units consistently. So that one can be nice. Separatist Battle Super Tank, another exploit payoff or card. Creative Thinking, again, Color Trooper token, not that exciting. Infantry of the 212, I think this one actually is kind of interesting. 2/4 for 3 resources. Again, not super exciting, but does have the Republic tag. Holdout Blaster can be played in any deck. I do like colorless options. This one, you could deal 1 damage to an enemy ground unit, which can be relevant in limited to take out a battle droid token. So not completely unplayable. B2 Legionaries, this is actually really solid. 5 resource, 5/4 Sentinel Overwhelm is really good stats. Do like that one. Encouraging Leadership, not a card I would recommend playing in limited for the most part, unless you have some absurd battle droid token generation or something like that. This one, Old Access Codes. This one, not extremely exciting. I do like the 1 damage from Holdout Blaster a little bit more, as drawing a card can be okay, but not super exciting. Elite P-38 Starfighter. This one's pretty nice. Dealing 1 damage to a unit, again, can be pretty nice in limited. This was also just a nice statted space unit, so I don't mind that one at all. Padme, well, this one can actually be pretty good if you do have the option to trigger that Coordinate. I wouldn't mind playing Padme. A 1/4 isn't too bad in limited as a base level. And we got ourselves Jango Fett. So now we got 4 different leaders, or 5 different leaders, which is really nice, by the way. There are sometimes when you just get duplicate leaders and you're really sad. 5 separate leaders in varying aspects is a really nice option, or at least gives us really nice options. Here we've got a option to kind of exhaust units and either use our units to attack theirs or use direct damage options. Jango, this one I think is pretty bad in limited. You're not going to have that many ways to trigger the damage effect, with the exception of just dealing damage to your opponent's units. And that's going to require you to have a lot of fodder units. And normally that's not a good plan to have in limited. It's just to have fodder units to stall out your opponent, unless you have some way to come back, and you normally won't in limited. He is someone who is a 3/7 for 5 resources, which is reasonable, but not a huge fan of Jango Fett. I think he is probably the weakest leader that we've seen so far that we've pulled. On to our last and final pack. Let's see what we've got. Ooh, Shadowed Intentions. So this one's pretty interesting. I don't think it's a strong limited card. I would not put this in my deck on most occasions, because you're not going to find that your units are going to be defeated or captured or returned by enemy card abilities. It's mostly going to be combat damage of units. So not a huge fan of this one. Got ourselves another low altitude gunship. I do like that. Another Padme Amidala, another one I do like. Battle Droid Legion. This one's a very nice exploit to kind of pay off to create generate more and more value. Heavy Persuader Tank, another exploit card. Droid Commando, really nice separatist option. Favorable Delegate. This one, it can be a reasonable play. Not exciting, but can be okay. Another Devastating Gunship, nice little space unit. Volunteer Soldier, popping up yet again. Nice little colorless option, can be an okay card. We get ourselves Encouraging Leadership, another card I recommend not playing. Another In Pursuit, another Clone Dive Trooper, Outspoken Representative. All these cards we've seen before. Not excited about any of them realistically. Grim Resolve, maybe can get in some damage. Maybe there is some damage being passed around in limited, so perhaps you can get some value there. We got ourselves Nala Se as the last leader. So 6 unique leaders, which is not common, I'll say. And we got 2 of them as rare leaders, right? We got ourselves Wat Tambor over here, and we got ourselves Nala Se. So that's pretty interesting. Nala Se gives us the option to play like both Vigilance, Villainy, and an Aspect, and then pop in some of the clone cards that maybe are outside of those aspects. But I don't think it's going to be all that relevant, as well, you don't really want to be going out of your way to play a bunch of cards with, well, a 4-cost leader with a 1/7 as a stat line. The heal 2 damage from a base, or from your base when a clone unit dies, is it going to be insanely relevant? You really want more value on your leader. This is what you want, more stats, as that's one of the ways that you're going to deal with a lot of units. So I'm not a huge fan of Nala Se. I know some people are, but even if we were to look and consider how many clone units we have, I don't think it's going to be that appealing for us. Considering we don't really have that many bombs that we want to go out of our way to play, right? If you look at our rares, I would consider a lot of these unplayable, and that's the next step I want to do. I'm going to look at some of these cards like Barris, not playable, not even going to consider it. Shadow Intentions, also another one that I don't really want to be considering. The other ones I could consider. Invasion of Christoph. This is very expensive, but maybe something I would want to put in my deck. And the off chance I get up to like 9 resources and I defeat 3 units to go ahead and play this, maybe. But these 2 rares, not at all something that I want to consider playing. So if I wanted to go for Nala Se, which I think is the first leader that I want to look at, I'm not going to be playing Django. I don't think this leader is very strong. So then I'm looking at a couple of different other options. And then we're looking at our rares. We want to kind of pull apart the cards that I really don't want to play. Nala Se, I think this is another one that's kind of easy to eliminate. If I look at the clone options I have, I like Clone Dive Trooper. The altitude gunships aren't even clone units, so it's not like I could play them out of Aspect. Infantry of the 212th. That's a vigilance card. It's not even like extremely difficult to play, so it's not like I could get much value from that one. I mean, how many clones do we even have? Is it just the dive troopers? I think it is. I guess we have the phase 1 clone troopers as well, right? Phase 1 Coruscant Guard, I guess, if you wanted to play a command card. So we have like Coruscant Guard, phase 1 clone trooper, another phase 1 clone trooper I know of, another Coruscant Guard. Yeah, I guess we could play the Jesse, but I'm not even sure if I want to play this guy. Not even sure I want to play him. I guess we'll see. He might actually be something I want to play if I'm going to go a little bit more aggressive. So we will try that out, or we will see about it in just a moment. But Nala Se, really, really weak. The only clones that we would be able to splash are 1 or 2 resource plays, which are not something that I'm super excited about. So I think Nala Se is going to be going into the unplayable category. So now we look at our cards, and the next step, as we are removing some unplayables, or cards that I would consider not to be really exciting. I think all of these other leaders do have potential options. The next step is to both sort by aspect as well as sub aspect, so villainy, and then pull out some unplayables from the cards that are in these cards, and what I consider semi-playable. So cards that I'm not excited about playing, but cards I would consider playing. Let's do that. And I'll be right back. I'm going to skip ahead so you don't have to watch the whole process. So after all that, this is what I am left with. So over here, we got some of the Unplayables. These are the cards that I would consider to be cards that basically have little to no value in our deck, don't really have the correct setup for it, or just don't do a whole lot. For example, I mentioned Barris. She doesn't really have any force synergies, with the exception of Padawan Starfighter, but it's a 1-resource 1/1. It just doesn't do a whole lot. Shattered Intentions, you're not going to be fighting a lot of removal options. Jar Jar's a 4-resource card, so it's a 4-resource 2/3 that randomly can just kill your own units. So these are the unplayables. So I don't really think I'll be considering these at all. These are the semi-playables, and either they have like something that I'm not interested in most of the time, they have a weak stat line, or they have like a unique kind of option. You'll notice a lot of cunning cards in this pile usually, and the reason for that is there are a lot of tempo options, and again, you're mainly looking for higher value plays when you're playing limited. It's oftentimes a little bit more of a value game. You can't usually rush down your opponent that easily. One card that I think is definitely in this category simply because of the double aspect is Manufactured Soldiers. If this was a single command, I would love to play this card, but, well, double command can be a little bit tricky. Then we go over to the cards that are just in the playable category. Cards that I'm not like extremely excited to play, just they're solid or they're above average, and I'm looking at them and I'm like, okay, these are cards that I'm interested in. There are some rares over here. I do think that the Invasion of Christophs is going to be pretty tricky to play if I'm not playing a Separatist deck, because the Separatist generates a lot more kind of random units. If I'm not playing a Separatist deck, I probably will still play it because there is an off chance. Again, this is a flex slot, so the power level of this card is so strong that if I'm in a spot where I have a bunch of trash units that might die, or if my opponent just has a ton of units on the board and I can't recover, maybe it's worthwhile. We'll see, but it is a card I am considering. I think Caught in the Crossfire is actually pretty strong. I think Saw Gerrera is really strong. I think Mace Windu's Lightsaber is going to be whatever, like not exciting at all, just kind of whatever. But that's the next step. We look at our leaders. We see we've got Quinlan Voss, we've got Wat Tambor, we got Obi-Wan, we technically have General Grievous, and we have Ahsoka. I think Anakin is better than Ahsoka, so I would not have even considered Ahsoka. Realistically, I would just look at Anakin. In terms of General Grievous's case, I think our command villainy, our cunning villainy, is looking pretty weak anyways, so I don't think I would have considered General Grievous all that much, because I would want to go into two combination of aspects. I would probably want to go into villainy vigilance because of how many options that we have, but I guess we will have to see. I think the first thing that appeals to me is heroism, and the reason for that is because of Saw Gerrera, alongside the massive amount of heroism vigilance and heroism aggression cards that are not only solid, like solid to above average, but also the quantity, right? Now, I do think some of these are a little bit weaker, like Outspoken Representative are a little bit weaker than some of the other ones that we have here, and a lot of them are pretty expensive. But if we're also playing Heroism, then we get access to some early drops, and this Sentinel versus the Separatist deck gets two kind of expensive Sentinels, an Exploit Payoff, which is a synergy piece basically only, and then the Droid Deployment, which helps with that synergy. So I think they're pretty even in terms of heroism versus villainy, but I do like Saw Gerrera, as I mentioned. I do like Obi-Wan's Ether Sprite, which is nice. I also think Jesse is a card that I would put in my deck. I was thinking about this more, and this is a card that in some cases is going to be bad, and you just resource it if your opponent's playing those types of decks that really take value out of a lot of droid tokens. But if your opponent's just getting 2 1/1s, I think I'd rather have a 3-resource 4/4 that attacks for 5 for sure. So just something to consider. With that, I think Anakin is a little bit stronger than the Obi-Wan, but I do think Obi-Wan is an option, and I will be building 3 different decks because I think the 3 options, Quinlan Voss is not going to be an option because there's just too few cutting cards. I think for that to really be appealing to me, to play a leader that's like not exactly insane comparatively to, I think, Obi-Wan and Anakin. I think they're a lot better. But I think Anakin is the best option. And if I were to look at this, I would think that Anakin would be my best option to win. So we're going to pull Anakin down. We're going to pull all of the cards down in our aspects. And one thing you'll quickly realize in sealed is you don't really get much option. You just put the cards that you can play in your deck and you're like, okay, what do we have here, right? We're going to pull down all of the colorless aggression cards. We're going to pull down all those. We're going to pull down twice the pride, I think. I'm actually interested in this card because of Anakin himself, because he's got 7 toughness. I can put this on Anakin for 4 resources and give him +4 power, which can help you just completely end a game, which I think could be interesting. I do like these 2 cards. I also really like just having upgrades in a deck that has a pretty powerful leader that can get really high statted. So I do think Mace Windu's lightsaber does look pretty okay. So between all of this, we've got Jesse. Oh, and we're going to also pull over all the heroism cards as well to start kind of formulating our curve. So when we're looking at a deck, we want to have enough early plays to not get completely overwhelmed. So we're going to kind of separate this by resource cost and kind of where they will fit in. We also have quite a few Republic units. So low altitude gunship is going to hopefully deal some at least 2 to 3 damage, it looks like. Saw Gerrera looks pretty good. The heavy persuader tank, this I think is not really going to be going in our deck. We don't really want to be exploiting things out in the Republic decks. Reckless Torrent looks pretty good. Another thing that I will be doing is separating space units from ground units in terms of curve. Again, we're looking at interaction, right? We're trying to figure out, okay, can we actually go ahead and interact with our opponent's space units? Dendup's Loyalist with Anakin's abilities is something that we have to consider. 2/3s are way stronger when you can pump them for 2 at your will, because you're going to find that your opponent's also playing a lot of 2/3 type units because they're fillers, and suddenly your units will be able to kill their units and live. And this one has Overwhelm, which works really well with Anakin's ability, so I actually do like that. Vanguard Droid Bomber, this one only does something kind of nice if your opponent, or if you're have separatist units on your battlefield. I don't think that's going to be the case, so it's not a card I really want to be playing. So I think I'm going to put it over here in the kind of don't really want to be playing that card. I'm going to take a quick look at some of the cards that we have over here in terms of aggression cards. Okay, do we want to play any of these? Maybe old access codes is an option. Again, I do like buffing up our units. We have upgrades over here and events. I'm also going to put in this category. These are kind of like interaction pieces or something that's not going to just be on curve units. We kind of have an awkward curve with just aggression. We have a nice early couple of plays. 4 early plays in terms of 2 resources is a nice place to be. I don't think that you're really looking for more than that in most decks. I think Anakin could go a little bit more if you do have them, but I think all 4 of these are perfectly playable and actually do work well with Anakin. Jesse looks totally fine. We got a couple 3 drops. We have no 4 resource plays and we have no 5 resource plays with the exception of Senatorial Corvette. So I would like to have more of those. So now we're looking at, okay, what can we pair this aspect with? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 cards. So we have half of a deck. And that also includes the heroism cards. So we need to find an aspect that's nice and juicy. We need to find a lot of cards within one aspect. So if we're looking around the command options that we have, well, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards that we're looking at. Cunning, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but that's like pretty weak cards, I'd say. Not exactly cards that I'm excited to play. If we look at aggression, we're already done with that. Vigilance, we have, well, 3 resource play. We've got ourselves a couple of expensive options. We've got a couple more 3 resource plays and 2 resource plays. An outspoken representative, this is something that I might want to take a double look at because this can be pumped up with Anakin to get 2 additional power, which could be interesting. So I think our only realistic option is to go with Vigilance here. And I'm going to bring over all of these cards, even the Warrior Drone, because actually Warrior Drone, with the exception of multi-transport, can actually be pumped up in Anakin to be a 3/4, right? That's actually really powerful. So I actually don't mind that one at all. Padawan Starfighter, we got Captain Typho, giving some Sentinel can be okay. Double Outspoken Representative, I think, is fine. We have Infantry of the 212th. We've got double Ether Sprite, which is really nice to deal with a lot of space units, so I don't mind that one at all. Knight of the Republic and a couple more 6-drops, so lots of 6-drops in this deck. And then we got Warrior Drone. So kind of an interesting couple of options that we've got. We could choose to add the Holdout Blaster, the Volunteer Soldier. I actually don't mind the Volunteer Soldier because we have a lot of troopers, right? We've got the, let me just move these aside. We got the Dendup's Loyalist and the Phase 1 Clone Trooper, all of which are troopers. So this could potentially cost 2, and that could be another playable that we could add to our deck. So this ends up being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26 cards. So that's a nice base level. Again, that gets us right to the point where we have 4 flex slots, and we can start slotting in cards that maybe aren't super strong or maybe are off color that we think could do some work in our deck. And definitely play those. For example, Lethal Crackdown. If we're going to play Vigilance, I wouldn't mind playing 1 copy of this in our deck. But that puts us at 26 cards. Our curve looks okay. We don't have any 4 resource plays, but to be honest, if we look at the rest of our card pool, we just don't have 4 resource plays. Like, we just didn't open them, right? If you look, again, the only 4 resource plays that we really have are these removal options. There's not really any other 4 resource plays that we can look at, so that's not something I should concern myself with. Besides, we have a lot of 2 resource plays, and I think in Anakin's style of deck, we do want to be a little bit more aggressive, and having a couple more Republic cards to work with our low altitude gunships is nice. So Outspoken Representative does work well. Padawan Starfighter ends up being a 3/3 in space with Anakin, which is nice. I think some cards like Warrior Drone, Padawan Starfighter works explicitly well with Anakin. Same with Captain Typho and Infantry of the 212. Having that high toughness, being essentially 4/4s on attack, is really nice. Dendup's Loyalist, I really like in Anakin, and I think we could build ourselves a really aggressive deck. So I do like all the cards that we got going on. We got some really nice space interaction with double Obi-Wan's Ether Sprites. We're pretty much guaranteed to have it when we need it. And then we have a nice kind of flip turn. When we get Anakin down, we can put an altitude gunship or a Sentinel in place. I do like having the Saber tank and the Ion tank, because that's going to give us a Sentinel that can protect Anakin to potentially get in some damage, and also just being a beefy Sentinel that can stop the pressure after we've dealt ourselves a lot of damage. Now, one thing that I think that this deck's going to really rely on, Anakin has Overwhelm, which is really important, because what we're going to want to do with Anakin is go ahead and put some upgrades on him with Mace Windu's Lightsaber and Twice the Pride, and just charge in for a ton of damage. Charge in for a ton of damage into their base, and that's going to be our finisher. If we look at kind of what the plan is here with this deck, we're going to be playing out our early game units, trading with their units, and then by the time we get to Anakin, I'm almost certain we're going to have 10 to 15 damage on our base. I'm looking at like 15, maybe even 20 damage on our base. With all these early plays, trading off. And then that means we're going to have a 7/7 or an 8/7 when he comes down, which is really, really impactful. And then we can close out the game with our 6 resource plays at the following couple of turns. Low altitude gunship's going to be able to kill off something. The Sentinels are going to stall. Saw Gerrera is going to do some work, etc. Saw Gerrera also works exceptionally well with Anakin. So I think we got ourselves a nice situation here. Now, that's going to be kind of the first option that we have. I'm not actually going to really change anything, because the next leader that we have, well, I should say, we do need to fit in 4 other slots here. So Invasion of Christophsis, I think, could be an option. We have Outspoken Representatives and Clone Trooper tokens. I think this is a card that I would just slot in this deck. Again, we have flex slots. It's not going to be a strong card 90% of the time. There is that off chance that we could end up playing it. I think that the Confederate Tri-Fighter could be an option that we want to play. Right? This is just a 5 resource 3/3 in space, which could be okay. We could also consider like some of the neutral aspect cards. I do think Lethal Crackdown, one of these cards, is going to be worthwhile. I do think that we could consider maybe playing like holdout blaster if we wanted to get a colorless card in there, although I don't think that card's very strong. I think maybe you could play Vanguard Droid Bomber in our deck just because, but it is a cheap card and we don't really need more like those types of cards. We are really hitting the bottom of the barrel, I'll say that much, for the last couple of slots. So we need 2 more cards. You could add double Lethal Crackdown so you can resource one of them and then play the other one early on, and depending on how the game shapes up, I think that's totally fine. And then the last thing would be 1 more unit. You could put like R2D2 in there. I actually wouldn't mind going ahead and splashing this card here. Come on, give me my R2. This allows us to like discard a card, maybe search for something else, and that would be our 4 resource play. Would be the R2. I think that's probably what I would go with in terms of flex slots. Again, the last 4 slots in your deck, when you're playing sealed in Star Wars Unlimited, you're going to find that it's really difficult to reach 30 cards. Like really, really difficult to reach 30 cards. And so you're going to find that some of these cards you're like really not interested in playing, and that's totally fine. You could consider strategic analysis, old access codes, etc., but I wouldn't really want to do so. So that is going to be the first deck. Let's move on to our second one. It would be Vigilance, Aggression, Anakin. Let's move on to our second one. So in our second deck, I think it's pretty straightforward. We just swap leaders in Obi-Wan. I think this is a little bit weaker because a lot of the units that we have in here work specifically well with Anakin's ability, but in some cases, they also work with Obi-Wan's. For example, the Outspoken Representative, they take 2 damage. You could start healing it up. The Warrior Drone has a nice high toughness that you could start healing up with Obi-Wan. I think the most interesting thing about this is having a massive Sentinel that you can start putting things like Twice the Pride on, Mace Windu's lightsaber, and getting some value there. But overall, this one's going to be a pretty quick deck building because, again, I think Obi-Wan was another leader that we could have access to. But I don't really consider going into any of these other aspects as a really viable option, right? Because of just how weak a lot of the cards are. And so we're probably relegated to Aggression, Vigilance yet again. You could consider, I suppose, Heroism or Cunning, but you really don't get that many different options. And I don't think they're that strong. I think I'd rather have a lot more of the standard playables and some of the power level in like Saw Gerrera and Low Altitude Gunship. This is really going to rely on Obi-Wan just like it relies on Anakin, but this is just going to be a little bit more defensive version. You're going to try to get more value and grind them out, whereas Anakin's going to be a little bit more of trying to just beat down your opponent when you deploy Anakin and just getting that value out of just having a massive body. I don't think Obi-Wan is nearly as strong as Anakin. Mind you, I think it's significantly weaker based on the cards that we have here. Again, cards that I think of when I'm looking at Anakin, Dendup's Loyalist, having Overwhelm just doesn't work nearly as well with Obi-Wan. If we look at Jesse, that card could just smack for a total of 7 points of damage with Anakin, which is absolutely absurd. These are just a lot of different cards that don't really benefit from trying to get some value trades and healing up because you don't have the power value to do so, right? We're going to have 2 3s. Those things aren't going to survive the attack most often unless they're hitting low cost units. And if there are hitting low cost units, the healing 1 damage isn't going to be enough to actually keep those things alive. So I don't think Obi-Wan's going to be a realistically viable option, but let's move on to our third leader here. Moving on to our third leader, I think Wat Tambor would be the one I'd want to go with. And we have a bunch of cards down here. Most of them are heroism cards, but I think the color combination, obviously we have command, so we'd be looking at the command cards initially, and those haven't been really touched yet. Guess what? Yoink. All of them. We have a couple of exploit options. I think that we can set up exploit nicely in the deck, especially with droid deployments, and if we go into vigilance, we can do so. But let's first look at our command cards. We can play like things like Coruscant Guard totally fine in our deck. These are actually really nice, I think, in Wat Tambor, because what you can do with Coruscant Guard is if you do have a couple battle droid tokens, you play Coruscant Guard, you ambush, it dies, it kills a unit, and then you can get +2/+2 to one other of your units, which I think is actually really nice. Ryloth Militia looks pretty nice. Nice little early game couple of plays. We got ourselves some space units over here. We got B2 Legionaries. We have Droid Commando, which we put in the 3-drop slot. I would put droid deployment in the 2-drop slot in a unit because it's basically a unit. Patrolling AAT, it's a nice little sentinel. These are extremely expensive. They kind of go into all their own category here. And then subjugating starfighter. Actually don't mind being one of our only space units. It could really, really mess up your opponent's units as they can ambush some smaller space units, which is really nice. And also the extra battle droid token works really well with Wat Tambor. Here's the problem. Command is a really light aspect. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 cards, including the villainy cards, right? So we really need to pull in a bunch more cards. And that's going to be probably, unfortunately, probably aggression is what we have to go for because there's just not enough cards in vigilance. But let's look at what vigilance looks like just real quickly. Whoa. Pull down vigilance, pull over some of these cards, pull over the Padawan Starfighter. Again, not excited to play it, but we kind of are forced to. Volunteer Soldier, Infantry of the 212th, Warrior Drone. All of these have got to go over here. Invasion can go into like the events category. Wartime trade officials look pretty good. The devastating gunships, lots of space units here. A couple of lethal crackdowns looks pretty good as well. Infantry of the 212th can go into the 3-drop slot. Warrior Drone, Volunteer Soldier, Padawan Starfighter, and that is kind of what we've got, right? Like these are the only options that we really have. If we look over here, we could play Manufactured Soldiers. I actually wouldn't mind playing this one in this deck because it could create a bunch of fodder for us at the 5 resource play. So I would actually consider that as a semi-playable here. Everything else looks pretty bad. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. So even with some of the cards that we're not super excited of playing, we have 27 cards. Next thing I would look at is like, okay, should I play like, I have no idea, the Vanguard Droid Bomber, I suppose, or we could play Asajj and the Heavy Persuader tank. These have exploits, so you can cheat on costs there. That would be like maybe the cards I would go to. You could also consider things like political pressure in this deck because the battle droid tokens actually do have some value there, which I think would be totally reasonable. But these are some of the options that I think look the most interesting to me because this is also technically a 9-drop. This is a 7 resource play, but it's going to be exploited out. The teal deal 2 damage to a ground unit can actually be interesting. This is a 6-drop. This is a 4-drop, so it's going to be in the 4-drop slot. So this is kind of what the deck would look like in my initial overview. I don't think this is nearly as strong. Really, you'd be exploiting cards out to try to get some value, but you'd have to set it up. You'd have to get the right draw in order for that to be viable at all. And then otherwise, you just have these really expensive cards that are sitting around because you don't really want to sacrifice the majority of your units. And then you don't really have that great of a curve. I don't think you're going to be able to use the Wat Tambor's ability all that well because you don't have enough high value units. I think that this looks significantly weaker than even the Obi-Wan heroism option. I think by far our best option would be Anakin and kind of doing that kind of glob that I mentioned earlier. The ability to just take some of these weaker units like Warrior Drone, for example, and make it a 3-4 where it could kill a unit and survive, where your opponent has to consciously think about this unit now because we can still do it again with Anakin, I think makes Anakin a really, really nice suggestion. So overall, I think Anakin would be the one that I would be going with. That deck would look something like this, where we pull down a lot of the vigilance cards that we were using up here. Where is... There are these two. That's what I was grabbing. We would pull these down here, bring them back to the old faithful. And that's the type of deck that we're looking at. Decent amount of everything, really. If we look at our leader, we have a nice leader with a lot of synergy, high power, right? The leader itself is just going to give us a lot of value. I think Anakin is extremely powerful. He's going to come down and he's going to be a 6-7. Even if you do nothing, he's most likely going to be like a 6-7. That's a really, really annoying leader to deal with, right? Then his action is going to make all of your units threats. That's something that's also really important, okay? So in terms of leaders, really nice. In terms of quantity, we picked up some of the highest quantity options that we had, right? And we jammed them into the deck, right? Perfect. Commons and uncommon strength. Low altitude gunship is a really nice uncommon, nice little removal option. We've got ourselves lethal crackdown, which we're able to splash or play off color. Obi-Wan's ether sprite's really powerful in terms of space units. And in terms of some commons in the ground, we've got like Jesse, which I think is pretty nice. And then we also have like, well, some solid early plays, which are going to make us able to be aggressive and able to trade off units and actually get some value going, which I think is nice. Next up is in terms of, card quality, power level, synergy. What do we've got going on? There's a lot of synergy with Anakin, right? Padawan Starfighter is going to get randomly pumped by Anakin. It also makes this stat line way better against early space units because of Anakin. Lots of our units, like Dendup's Loyalist, gets way better with Anakin because overwhelming through. Same with Warrior Drone. So very high level synergy. We also have a decent amount of power. Again, Anakin himself, alongside some of the cards that we have, really, really strong. We get to play a lot of our rares, like Caught in the Crossfire, as well as Saw Gerrera, right? Which are some of our strongest cards. Heck, we're even playing Invasion of Christophsis, but I don't think this is a card we're really going to be playing all that often. Again, high power level commons and uncommons, which is really nice. And then lastly, off-color cards. Well, we get to play a couple of them because we can't have to make the 30 cards. So I think we pretty much filled in all the kind of aspects of deck building that I'm considering, and I think Anakin is the way to go. We could consider Ahsoka. I think that card is a lot weaker as our leader. We're not really doing the whole token creation thing. We're not really going ahead and looking for an earlier to deploy leader for any specific reason, and we're not going to get a bunch of units on the battlefield to trigger coordinate all that frequently anyways, and a lot of our units get significantly weaker without Anakin as our leader. So all that to say, I don't think Ahsoka's a consideration. About General Grievous, I just don't think we really pulled a great villainy pool. If we were in villainy cunning, I mean, what will we get? Elite B-38 Starfighter is great. Wartime top profiteering is pretty mediocre. So we would be in a really weak aspect, and then we would have the same problem with Wat Tambor, right? Wat Tambor has actually a lot more playables in command than Grievous would have had in cunning. So Grievous, I think, would have been even weaker than Wat Tambor just because of the quantity of cards that we had. But it is something that you're going to want to consider because they're perfectly playable. It's just a matter of, I don't think that we really had any other options besides going into kind of this combination because of the power level, the amount of cards that we had, and the leader himself kind of pumping up some of these cards that are a little bit on the weaker side, like Outspoken Representative, Padawan Starfighter, but because of Anakin, they get a lot stronger, which I think is something that you need to consider. This is one of the reasons why Rey from last set was really strong, was that it made a lot of these mediocre units to units that are actually good, right? Like a 1-resource 2/2 suddenly became a battlefield breed in Rey's deck. Like that is absurdly powerful, right? So just something to consider. One thing that I would really have liked to have had in this deck was some earlier plays, some 4 and 5 resource plays instead of all these 6 resource plays, but we just didn't open that. And that's something that you have to consider, right? You are at the luck of the draw. That's what Seal does. When you're drafting, you can at least control a little bit where you can read the signals and get some options open for you. But in Sealed, you open packs, you open, and you build. That's all you got to do. But hopefully this was helpful for some of you. Hopefully some of you just had a good time watching the video, building a deck with me. Let me know if you think there's any other options that I should have potentially gone with. Like maybe you have a different position on Nala Se and you'd rather play like a Vigilance Command Villainy Nala Se with trying to go ahead and exploit stuff out, but then you also get to go ahead and play things like Infantry of the 212. But I guess you could have played that anyways. Or like Saw Gerrera. Wait, Saw Gerrera is not clone, so that doesn't even count. What is a clone that we could have played? I don't even know. I'm just saying. Let me know if you think there's any other deck leader that you would have considered. Maybe Jango Fett's on your list. I'm still. What clone unit could we not have played if we were in like Vigilance Command? Nala Se. What clone unit? There's got to be one here, right? I forgot there was. We went over a couple of them. I have no idea. Oh, phase 1 clone trooper. There you go. We could have played phase 1 clone trooper and Jesse in Nala Se. Maybe that's worth it. I don't know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.